In this Phantom Blade Zero video, we're going to be taking a look at the extreme difficulty of the game that was added during Tokyo Game Show's demo, which I recently played a couple days ago in Japan. And this is absolutely absurdly hard. I had mentioned in our previous video that Phantom Blade Zero was a little bit on the easy side. Well, when playing the extreme difficulty, that is no longer the case. So we're going to get into that in just a second. You may notice that this gameplay footage looks familiar. These are the same three bosses in an area of the game that you saw in the Gamescom demo. But this time we're going to be showcasing most of it on the extreme difficulty with some comparisons to the hard difficulty, which I also recorded, and also showcasing two new weapons. One of them is a curved sword that kind of attacks quickly like you might expect it to, kind of allows you like quick slashes, and even seems to have a bleed effect that triggers if you hit the enemy or boss enough times, as you'll see like a huge chunk of their health rip off with this like bloody explosion if you hit them enough times quickly. So that's been added, and then there's also like a dual circular blades kind of paired weapon that attacks very, very quickly. And when you finish off your combo, sometimes you can even throw those blades over a distance. So if you dodge backward, you can like still put in damage into the boss from a good distance away, which is really nice. They also showcased a new ranged weapon, or at least one that I didn't notice was in the previous demo, which is like the Dancing Lion, which allows you to kind of put on the Dancing Lion helmet and then just like emit fire in all different directions. You can kind of point the direction that you want the fire to blow, and it's probably pretty good with multiple enemies, I would imagine. Although I didn't manage to use it super effectively in my time playing, I just didn't give it a lot of thought, really. Okay, so moving on to the extreme difficulty. This is a setting that the creative director told me will not be unlocked by default and will be unlocked after playing through the game once. So this effectively could be considered your New Game Plus difficulty if you move on to it. I don't know if there's a New Game Plus, but this difficulty won't be unlocked until you play through the game one time, so you're not going to be able to start off with Extreme. So there are some things I noticed about Extreme, and then there are other things the creative director mentioned to me while I was playing. And first of all, it seems like the parry timing for the blue flashes and the dodge timing for the red flashes is much tighter. Felt like it was more difficult to pull these off and get the slowed time effect. And a lot of times I was just outright trying to just get a deflect off at all, or get a dodge off at all, instead of trying to time it perfectly, or a lot of times I would just die to these bosses anyway. Secondly, the health pools and damage that these bosses do doesn't seem to have been increased, and when I was talking with the creative director of the game, he mentioned that the difference between hard and extreme isn't the stats of the boss. It's not these things, it's the actual AI has been tweaked. And when you actually look at the gameplay of the boss in hard mode versus the gameplay of the boss in extreme, you can kind of notice a few things. The first thing that you're going to notice is that on extreme, bosses don't just let you attack into the back of them like repeatedly, like, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row without doing anything. So you can really rip off huge chunks of health in hard mode, but on extreme, they tend to turn around pretty quickly out of this and get back to attacking you. So you kind of got to be on the ready to go on to the defense very, very quickly at a moment's notice, which you can in this game, so that's not a problem. So you can be comboing away and go immediately to defending, but you got to be ready for it. If you expect to fight the same way when you've got bosses back to you, you're going to be in a bad spot. Secondly, it feels like the window to attack these bosses is a lot less, meaning that they attack you more often, putting you on the defensive a lot more often, making you have to parry and dodge their attacks more in order to win fights, rather than you being to play a bit more aggressively. You can still play aggressively if you're good, but I feel like the vast majority of players, when they're playing on the extreme difficulty the first time, are going to be put a little bit more on the back foot, and they're going to have to get their parry timing down. They're going to have to get their dodge timing down a bit more, because these things will become more important in extreme difficulty. And then lastly, one of the things you'll notice, particularly on the last boss of this demo, is that he tends to do feints where like he'll spin and it looks like he's going to do an attack, but then he spins again, and then he looks like he's going to do attack, or maybe he doesn't attack, or he changes up his attack. And that's because the way the AI is designed in extreme mode is that the AI is actively determining what you're doing, what its positioning is, what you've been doing, and it's assessing, you know, based on your health, based on your distance, based on all of these different factors, what its next move should be, and it learns very, very quickly. So when you back away, for instance, to heal, it can determine that you're going to do that. It knows your health is low. It knows you're going to try and back away and heal. So if you try and create separation, it's just going to fling its weapon at you and hit you and interrupt you. And then if you try and heal again real quick, it's just going to do it again. It knows what you're trying to do. And so you really have to like get behind a pillar to heal, or you kind of have to like adapt your strategy, because the AI is really, really good. So generally what this means, and what the creative director said to me while I was fighting, is that the boss fights kind of end up on extreme difficulty being more like a fighting game, where if you're playing on like the very hard difficulty of a fighting game like Street Fighter or something like that, the AI can kind of anticipate what you're going to do, and you have to get better in order to beat it. And that's really what I had to do in order to successfully pull off these boss fights. And what I kind of realized was that I was relying too much on parrying. I wasn't dodging enough. I was using my dodge too much defensively. And then I started using my dodge or kind of shadow step to move offensively. So I would start dodging through the attacks and attacking the boss. And the boss didn't seem to be able to know what to do with that as much because it's reading a dodge. And I think it thinks that when you're dodging out of an attack rather than towards an attack. And that worked out really well for me. And after I kind of put that together, I was able to successfully take down that boss. But it was very, very challenging. The last boss, I don't know how many times I died on in extreme mode. It was like, I want to say 15 times on that boss. I died a lot. And if you look at my playtime and deaths for the hard mode versus the extreme mode, you'll notice that it took me over double the time to finish. And I had like over triple the deaths. So it is definitely much, much harder. And talking to the creative director and his team, they were telling me that the average person playing this demo would get through in about an hour with about 50 plus deaths. So I managed to do quite a bit better than that. I have obviously played this a little bit before, so that kind of gave me an advantage. But that is a lot of deaths and a lot of game time for 3 bosses in a very small area of the game to explore, to give you some idea of how difficult this is going to be. Anyway, I really loved the new difficulty mode. It was seriously rewarding when I would beat bosses, but it could also be frustrating. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because I actually started playing through again on the extreme mode a second time to see how I did, because I was talking to some of the members of S Game and they were saying that because of the way the AI is designed, like each time you fight a boss, it's not always going to be the same because it's reacting in real time to what you're doing. So if your strategy changes, the boss's strategy changes, and the attacks that it might do might be different. So I started playing through on a second playthrough, and when I got to the second boss, I really struggled with the second boss on the second time through, which I didn't in my first playthrough of Extreme, because the strategy that I was trying to employ that I had learned on the final boss was not working on that boss, and I had to like kind of go back to the strategy I was using before, and I was trying to remember what exactly that was, and it was really, really tough. I ended up dying a lot more times the second time. So I definitely think it's going to be kind of a mixed bag for people, where it could be very, very frustrating, but it can also be really, really fun and rewarding depending on what kind of player you are. Again, thankfully, you don't have to play this difficulty mode. This is unlocked after beating the game, so most people probably won't even play it, because I imagine most people will probably play through on normal or hard, and I don't know how many people will play again after that on extreme. Obviously, the hardcore players will, but I don't think that's the majority of people playing this game. So that kind of wraps up my video on Phantom Blade's extreme difficulty. I'm really, really enjoying this game. The more I see from it, the better it's getting. I cannot wait for it to come out. I'll leave you here with a couple of side-by-side videos of the boss fights on the hard difficulty versus the extreme difficulty, so you can see kind of the differences in the boss fights with no commentary, and you can just watch those. But otherwise, I want to know what you guys make of the game so far. What do you make of the extreme difficulty? What do you make of the gameplay that you're seeing? I feel like the combat in extreme difficulty is just so much fun to watch. It's probably a little bit less flashy than on hard because you're playing a lot more defensively, but I still think it looks wicked when you watch it and you're watching back your gameplay going like, wow, was I really able to do those things? But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below.